The city sprawled below my penthouse, a glittering carpet of a million lesser lives, each one blissfully unaware of the weight that came with a view like this. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass, the ice clinking a lonely rhythm against the crystal. The reflection staring back at me wasn't a man. It was an institution, a legacy, a target. They called it the high life, but from up here, all I could see was the fall. Every pane of glass was a mirror, and in every mirror I saw not just myself, but him, Mikhail, my shadow, my keeper. His presence was a constant, silent hum in the symphony of my existence. My days were a meticulously choreographed performance of opulence. Breakfast was served on porcelain older than most countries, each bite overseen by Mikhail's watchful gaze from the doorway. My morning walk wasn't through a park, but through the sterile, echoing halls of my private art gallery, the painted eyes of long-dead masters as judgmental as the living ones guarding me. Even the simple act of leaving home was a production. The heavy, thudding click of the armored car door sealing me inside was the sound of my cage being locked. It was luxury as a leash, a silken cord wrapped tight around my throat, a constant reminder that my life was not my own. The claustrophobia was a physical thing, a pressure building behind my ribs with every passing, gilded moment. We were cutting through the neon-drenched arteries of downtown when the world dissolved into chaos. It started with a percussive thump against the rear of the car, followed by the violent shriek of metal on metal as a black sedan slammed into our side. The city lights became a frantic, dizzying blur outside the reinforced windows. Muffled pops echoed from somewhere beyond my steel and glass cocoon, the distinct ugly sound of suppressed gunfire. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my expression remained a carefully constructed mask of indifference. Fear was a currency I couldn't afford to spend. Panicking was a luxury for men with choices. Mikhail was a machine. He didn't flinch, he didn't speak. With a violent jerk of the wheel, he spun the car 180 degrees, the tires screaming in protest as he floored the accelerator, weaving through the panicked traffic with impossible precision. I saw flashes of our other security vehicles, ghost-like sedans materializing from the side streets, boxing in the attackers. I didn't see the fight, but I heard it. The sharp report of unsuppressed rounds, the crunch of another impact, a final guttural shout cut short. It was over in seconds. The violence was an abstract concept, a messy, necessary business transaction handled by others so my hands could remain clean. The car descended into the sterile white light of the secure underground garage, the silence inside suddenly deafening. The engine cut out, and for a moment we just sat there. Then the lock disengaged with a soft click. I stepped out, the cool concrete a welcome anchor beneath my leather-soled shoes. I methodically adjusted the cuff of my shirt, straightened my suit jacket, and smoothed my tie, erasing any physical trace of the chaos. Without a word, without a single glance back at the scarred vehicle, I walked toward the elevator. Mikhail fell into step just behind my right shoulder, a constant, reassuring, and suffocating presence. But as the steel doors slid shut, I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I allowed a crack to form in the facade. A different life, a whispered possibility echoed in the silent descent. It was a dangerous thought, one that tasted like freedom and smelled like blood. The mahogany desk felt like a continent between us, a dark expanse under the single pool of light from a green-shaded lamp. The rest of my father's office was swallowed by shadows, much like the rest of our lives. I stood before him, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles were white. "I'm leaving," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I'm done with all of this." He didn't look up from the papers he was signing. He simply took a slow, deliberate sip from his glass of whiskey, the ice clinking like a distant bell. "There is no leaving," he said, his voice a low rumble that filled the cavernous room. "You are my son. This is your birthright and your burden. There is no out." The finality in his tone was a wall I couldn't seem to break through. My escape had to be a ghost operation, a whisper in the wind. The plan was a tapestry woven from desperation and adrenaline. In the city's underbelly, I found a forger, a man whose hands smelled of ink and fear, who crafted a new identity for me on a plastic card. Back in my gilded cage, I siphoned cash, crisp bills stuffed into a duffel bag hidden in the false bottom of my wardrobe. My phone, a digital leash, was the last thing to go. I placed it on the kitchen counter and walked away, feeling a strange mix of terror and liberation. The crowded market was my chosen stage, a chaotic ballet of vendors and buyers. I let my bodyguard, Marco, get distracted by a shouting match over a crate of fish, and I melted into the crowd, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. For a fleeting moment, I was just another face, anonymous and free. The alley I ducked into was supposed to be my gateway to a new life. It was narrow, smelling of stale water and refuse. But as I rounded the corner, a figure blocked the exit. It was Marco. He stood there, impossibly still, his expression as blank as a stone wall. There was no anger, no surprise, just a silent, unwavering presence. He didn't reach for me, didn't say a word, he just waited. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a cold, heavy resignation. The brief, intoxicating taste of freedom vanished, and I knew the attempt was over before it had even truly begun. He gestured with his head toward the street, and I followed, a lamb being led back to the slaughter. The black sedan was waiting, its engine humming softly, a purring beast ready to swallow me whole. The car ride was silent, a funereal procession through the city's glittering veins. It didn't take me back to the penthouse, but to a place I'd only heard whispers of, a cold, cavernous warehouse by the docks. The air was thick with the smell of brine and rust. My father was there, standing before a massive projection screen. He didn't speak, just nodded to a man in the corner. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy, brutal security footage. It was our rivals, the ones who had ambushed us, being dealt with. It was swift, merciless, and utterly final. He turned to me, his eyes 2 chips of ice. "That," he said, his voice echoing in the vast space, "is protection. That is the armor this family provides." He pointed a finger at the frozen image of a man's last terrified moment. "And that is what happens to those who stand alone." Now, I stand here again, in the penthouse that once felt like a prison. The city sprawls below me, a universe of lights and stories I'll never be a part of. But something has shifted. When I look at my reflection in the vast sheet of glass, the desperation is gone. The weariness has been burned away. In its place is something colder, something harder. I see the heir my father always wanted, the successor he tried to forge. He was right. There is no escape from this life. But I was wrong about what escape meant. It wasn't about running away from the empire. It was about running it. My fate wasn't to be a prisoner within these walls, but the king. And as I gaze out at my kingdom, I finally understand that the only way out was to go deeper in, to embrace the very power I once so desperately tried to reject.